guys, this is technically TDRug here, and after going through the playthrough of Suikoden 1 and now starting the journey on the Suikoden 2 playthrough, I kind of wanted to talk about some of the lore of the Suikoden world because that's where my big interest lies, because this game has such a huge amount of lore into it, and I figured I wanted to go ahead and start off kind of like a series by explaining what happened during these time periods that we don't really know of, like how did things form, what did people do before they got to where they were, etc, right? It's going to be called the Suiko Stories, and essentially it's just kind of like, you know, what ifs. And in this specific one, we're going to be talking about the Scarlet Moon Empire, our setting for the very first game of Suikoden 1. So, where does it all begin? Well, the Scarlet Moon Empire was formed in the year 230 of the solar year. As a side tangent, that's actually a calendar year that we get in the Suikoverse. It was pretty much the standard unit of measurement of time for years. We either go with that, or we get the In Solis is another method of that, and it was founded in the Toran region of the northern continent, which is where a majority of the Suikoden games take place in. We find out that during this time period, you know, funny enough, it was actually founded in a rebellion. So much like our adventure in Suikoden 1, rebelling against the Empire, it itself was formed from a rebellion against the Holy Harmonian Empire. That offensive was led by Kranak Rugner. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that name right. He was the Knight of the Scarlet Moon, who was aided by a strategist that we are familiar with, Julian Silverberg. Weird fact, the Silverbergs are kind of like the deuteragonists of basically every game they're in. Now, I say offensive, but I mean that in a slightly less literal way. And what I mean by that is that it was a military coup that was completely bloodless, like insanely bloodless, resulting in the capture of Harmonia's holy capital holy city of Rupanda, as well as the true rune that was in Barbarossa's sword, the Sovereign Rune. That's how that sword ended up becoming heirloom, being passed from ruler to ruler of the Scarlet Moon Empire in the form of the Dragon King sword. Not to be confused with the King Dragon sword, which was Victor's fully upgraded weapon in Suikoden 1 when you upgraded the Star Dragon sword to max level. After renaming Rupanda to Gregminster, along with the support and allegiance of an autonomous Lorimar region, this would solidify the Scarlet Moon Empire as one of the largest governing bodies in Suikoden. Now, this event had further consequences with Harmonia later on down the line for the next the next 70 years, the Empire kind of just solidified its power in the Toran region, the Scarlet Moon Empire it did actually, with its only real threat being their southern neighbors of the Kuluk Empire. Now see, Scarlet Moon had been doing these guys dirty for a real long time, and they just were not having it. They were just getting demolished. It's insane. To the point where they were demolishing them so bad that they kind of had to end up doing these, or the nobles of the Scarlet Moon ended up doing these things called human hunts, where they would just go out and raid Kuluk just because they could. At this point, it was like around 299 where one of these events led to some nobles as well as some citizens being completely destroyed by the wielder of another true rune. The child died from the usage of the rune, which then jumped to the officer who was promptly blamed for the incident. He fled to Kuluk, and his military officer was the one who ended up getting kind of blamed for the entire thing, so she actually ended up getting removed from her chief strategist position. Her name was Eleanor Silverberg. Now, the only thing of note that happens after this fact is around 307, when the Scarlet Moon Empire and Kuluk start open hostilities with each other. Warfare ploy by Eleanor, right? Which just kind of speaks to the intellect that almost every Silverberg tends to use other nations to the advantage of their current objective. They're essentially playing 4D chess. It's crazy. We then get to a period where the Empire was laying into its foundation, super heavy art, music, finance, all that stuff for about like 40 years at this point. So that makes me think that they were at war with Kuluk for at least that long at minimum, and definitely longer. After they built their new prison, which was Saunier, to replace it with their older high security one, they then, much later on, built the castle that would be nearby, Scarleticia, the one with all the flowers and stuff on it. And that was finished in 370, right? Now, at this point, this is like nearly 70 years of conflict. So again, it's like a 70-year span between conflict to conflict. And it is at this point that the tensions between Kuluk and the Empire time kind of like died down into memories, as Scarlet Moon Empire now had a new enemy to be kind of salty with, if you get the gist, which was actually the Joustin City-State Alliance up to the north, which is currently the setting of Suikoden 2 that I'm playing through right now. Surprisingly, even though there's like this mountain range in a big desert in between these two places, the Scarlet Moon Empire was mounting a very much defensive effort against the Joustin City-State Alliance. In response to this, right, this defensive stance, Scarlet Moon decided, well, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and build a castle here as a waypoint to kind of block off this one path that goes in between our places that we can kind of watch over things on. And that led over to this place being built known as Moravia Castle. Now, this is where we go and meet up with Qasim Hazil when we basically get towards the end of Suikoden 1. So that's also the place that's referenced as the northern checkpoint, so to speak, right? That's like that whole area, the northern checkpoint, Moravia Castle, and the two satellite forts that are nearby that I don't believe are actually on the map. We do know that they are there. They basically built this entire impregnable defense against the north and just left it that way for years. So now it's the year 446. And this is where we finally see a familiar face take the stage in the like timeline, and that is Barbarossa Rubiner, right? The at the time crown prince, who was kind of off and going to nearby fields and villages and blessing the crops and wishing for harvests and kind of like doing his duty by his people in the land. Now, at this point, there was a scandal that happened with his uncle Gale Rubiner. And this is the guy that is referenced by Kreutz in the Dragon Knight's Fortress. Basically, Gale didn't like the fact that Barbarossa was going to be the next leader, and so he plotted to overthrow Barbarossa. And how he did this was he basically took Barbarossa's generals and had them go off to far-off places all over the map of the Scarlet Moon Empire, places that were just way out of reach for him to get to and call to them readily, while he was out and about doing things. I guess Gale had some kind of control at the time. It's not really explained well exactly why he was able to do this in terms of controlling. My assumption is just that he was a military leader that was trusted. And when that happened, he basically conducted this thing that's known as the abdication trial, which basically let him sweep all the loyalists to his side, right? The idea was, I don't really know exactly what the abdication trial is, but my assumption here is that because Barbarossa's generals were in different places of the map at the time, it was seen as though Barbarossa was removing his generals from power in an attempt to abdicate the throne. So this now becomes the Succession Wars, right? Where Barbarossa flees to the Great Forest region, which is where the elves and dwarves and kobolds live, where they meet up at that Pana Yakuta castle. And that's kind of where we end up with this, like, meeting of great minds. And this is the first time that Matthew ever gets introduced. So Matthew Silverberg. At the time, he was just a chief medical officer working under Qasim, but he was also a strategist, because all Silverbergs, in some way, shape, or form, except Odyssa, but people don't sleep on Odyssa because she's got so many plans that it would make you think that even though she didn't have the same tactical, like, acumen that we see from the other ones, the other Silverbergs, I should say, she's still very much in the brain. But regardless, we're getting off track. Matthew gets consulted by Barbarossa, and he suggests that they go recruit Leon, so his uncle, right, Leon Silverberg, which apparently happened at the speed of instant, because literally after this, they completed the comeback of a lifetime within this year. So I'm imagining about 6 months where he's away, and then another 6 months of battle almost. Somewhere in this loop, it's not specifically stated when or exactly how, but Barbarossa earned the loyalty of the Dragon Knights. This is exactly that time where he got the Dragon Knights on his side, so Joshua and all of them. Then all this military might would be sent to Quaba, which is that fortress to the south of Gregminster. And that is where they kind of collided, the forces of Gale and Barbarossa. And when they collided, that is the kind of final hallmark battle that puts a pin in the War of Succession, where Gale is ultimately defeated and executed very much the same day, if not like a couple days later, finally ending these succession wars. And this is when Barbarossa finally takes the throne, becomes the leader of the Scarlet Moon Empire, and that kind of really ticks off the end of the 446th year. We get to the end of the year, it's now 447, right? Scarlet Moon Empire just got finished with an internal civil war. Now, they've got fighting again happening from the north, from, you guessed it, Joustin City Alliance. And they started making their way further down through the area of Kaleka. This is where it gets kind of gritty and very, not necessarily dark, but it's pretty dark. You'll remember that when we played through the game, Kaleka basically has itself completely destroyed. Well, this is when that incident happens. In the year 447, they decide the threat of Joustin continuing to come down is too much to let slide. The people of the Scarlet Moon Empire are like weary. They're down, they're defeated. They really don't want to fight anymore. And Barbarossa says, no. We need to keep the war going. As Matthew and Leon, though I believe it's more Matthew, Scarlet Moon officials basically say, we're just going to dress up as Joustin soldiers. We're going to send our soldiers over to Kaleka, dressed up in Joustin uniforms, and we're going to burn Kaleka to the ground. And that's going to spark the wheels of the war machine once more, and we're going to get that war fervor to push them back for good this time. And that is exactly what happened. This is where Matthew definitely lost his faith in the Empire and, again, led him to leave. And a lot of people saw this as like, okay, this is wrong. Up to this point, Barbarossa was seen as a very kind-hearted man, very against the sentiment of doing things against the will of his people. But during 446, he kind of lost touch with that because his wife, Claudia, had died literally in that succession war prior to this. So when it came to his desk, he is the one who greenlit the attack on Kaleka to go ahead and just take him out. No holds bars, it's over. We don't know when it happened, but at some point around now-ish, Wendy showed up in the picture and began to manipulate Barbarossa, because at this point he was just so done with the political drama and the political games that he said, you know what, you run the strings, I'm just happy with the fact that you're around and you look like my late wife, and I just don't care about politics anymore. I just want to do what I want to do. And this is what really led to the big, like, fires of revolution in the country, because this is when the country started devolving heavily into debauchery, into alcoholism, into gambling, into all the things that just really made this country revel in excess. But we get to the year 453. Now, the people are downtrodden, they're broken, they're tired, they're angry, their voices are just all screaming. They found themselves, they found purpose with new anti-imperial movements, and one such movement was led by a nobleman by the name of Achilles. His reason was that he was so upset and disgusted with how people were being treated that he just couldn't stand it anymore, and he went up into it knowing that it could cause him trouble, going so far as to take on an orphan from, my assumption is Joustin, knowing that it would get him killed. Now, I will get more into him and his execution later, but just know that his death is kind of the reason that led Odyssa to becoming the leader of the rebellion in the future. After this event, Odyssa would go on for 2 more years to be the head of the rebel army. She did this for 2 years, from 453 to 455. And that's kind of what led to the events of the game, is her antics, and then the first game's whole story taking place from 455 to 457, I want to say? Yeah, 457. So over 2 years, that's where we, as the player character, Tyr McDowell, go in and handle the events leading the army through many different battles against the 5 generals in Barbarossa, and eventually creating the Tauren Republic. That was a lot to get into, but now you know just a little bit more about the Suikoden world and some of the events surrounding the build-up to the first game, and really the franchise as a whole. And it's really sad because Barbarossa was not a bad guy at all. He was a really good man, and it's just kind of sad to see that he fell in such a way, because even at the very end, he really cared about his people. But hey, did you enjoy learning about all this? Did you find it a bit interesting? Did you think it was a bit too much or a bit too little? Well, let me know down below in the comments section. And please, for me, if you would be so kind as to smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, like Victor hit that official, and ring the notification bell for more videos like this in the future. I greatly appreciate it. Now, this is TDRug, and I'll catch you on the next video. Man, why did Barbarossa just let it go all the dirt? Like, he had every ability to save it, and he just blew it over just like some side chick.